I woke up to the sound of children screaming, wild, gleeful shrieks echoing across my land. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. Maybe some coyotes had gotten too close, or perhaps a pack of raccoons had broken into my chicken coop again. But no. As I stepped out onto my porch, coffee cup in hand, I was met with a sight so absurd I nearly dropped the mug. A dozen kids were running loose across my ranch, trampling my vegetable garden, swinging from the low branches of my century-old oak tree, and this part nearly gave me a stroke, riding my horses as if they were some rental ponies at a fair. My blood ran cold. Then I saw her. Standing in the middle of my land, arms crossed like she was surveying her kingdom, was none other than Karen. The same Karen who had for months been pushing to beautify the neighborhood with pointless HOA rules. The same Karen who had petitioned to make trash cans uniform in color. The same Karen who now, apparently, had decided that my private ranch was her personal playground. I stormed down the porch, my boots kicking up dirt as I closed the distance between us. "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I barked, waving a hand toward the chaos. She turned, completely unfazed, as if I were the intruder. "Oh, Jake," she trilled, smiling like I was an old friend. "So glad you could join us. I was just letting the kids enjoy some fresh air. You have such a lovely place, you really should consider sharing it with the community." My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Sharing it? This is my land. My private property. You can't just waltz in here with a bunch of kids and treat it like a park." She scoffed, rolling her eyes in a way that made my blood pressure spike. "Oh, come on. Don't be so stingy. The HOA has been discussing this for weeks. We all agreed your property would make a fantastic community space. It's wasted on just you." I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of what she was saying. "You agreed? I don't recall being part of that discussion." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Well, you don't live in the HOA, but your land is so close to the neighborhood. And look how happy the kids are." She gestured to a little boy who had just pulled a carrot straight out of my garden and was now attempting to feed it to one of my horses. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "Karen, get these kids off my land. Now." She gasped, clutching her chest like I had just insulted her ancestors. "Jake, are you seriously going to be this cruel? They're just kids. What kind of person doesn't want to bring joy to their community?" "The kind who doesn't appreciate trespassing," I shot back. "If you don't clear out in 5 minutes, I'll be calling the sheriff." Karen's smile flickered, but she didn't budge. "Fine," she said sweetly, but there was venom beneath it. "But you might want to rethink your attitude. The HOA has a lot of influence and we really wouldn't want to report you for being an unfriendly neighbor." I didn't bother responding. I just pulled out my phone and started dialing. That was all it took. Karen let out a dramatic sigh, then clapped her hands. "All right, kids, time to go. Mr. Grumpy Rancher doesn't want us here." The kids groaned, but they listened, reluctantly trotting back to their parents who had been setting up lawn chairs like they were settling in for a day-long picnic. As they packed up, Karen shot me a smug look. "We'll see how long you last, Jake. The community has needs." I watched as she and her little entourage finally disappeared down the road, but I knew in my gut this wasn't over. Sure enough, 2 days later I found a letter taped to my mailbox, a formal petition from the HOA, demanding that I allow limited community access to my land for recreational purposes. I laughed. Actually laughed. This woman really thought she could petition her way onto my property? I ripped the paper in half and tossed it into the trash, but the amusement didn't last long. The next day Karen was back. This time she wasn't alone. She had 2 other HOA members with her, smugly standing by her side like they were about to deliver an official decree. "Jake," she greeted me, her tone as sweet as poison. "I see you got our request. If you mean that joke of a petition, yeah, I got it. My answer is still no." She pursed her lips. "That's unfortunate. Because the HOA has rights, you know. And we're prepared to take legal action if necessary." I folded my arms. "Legal action? On what grounds?" "Well," she said, eyes twinkling with self-righteousness, "your property is adjacent to our community. That makes it part of the greater neighborhood ecosystem. By refusing to allow access, you're limiting the quality of life for local families." I stared at her, wondering if she had actually lost her mind. "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." The man standing beside her, a thin, balding guy who looked like he had spent too much time reading bylaws, cleared his throat. Technically, the HOA can push for a rezoning appeal, he said. It's happened before in other communities. I barked out a laugh. Not gonna happen. This land's been in my family for 3 generations. And last time I checked, you and your HOA have 0 jurisdiction over it. Karen's smile twitched. Jake, let's be reasonable. The HOA doesn't want to be your enemy. We just want what's fair. What's fair, I repeated slowly, is me being able to use my land without you treating it like a public park. Her expression hardened. We'll see about that, she muttered, turning on her heel. Her little group followed, but I didn't miss the way she hissed something under her breath as she walked away. That night I installed new security cameras. Something told me I was going to need them. I woke up feeling uneasy, the kind of gut instinct that tells you something is wrong before you even know what. It was too quiet. Normally, my ranch had the usual morning sounds. Birds chirping, the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, maybe one of my horses kicking at the stall if they were getting impatient for breakfast. But today something felt off. When I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. My land looked like a damn amusement park. Karen was back, and this time she had brought reinforcements. My pasture was crawling with people. Families were sprawled out on picnic blankets. Coolers popped open like they were tailgating a football game. A couple of dads were tossing a frisbee dangerously close to my chicken coop, and kids, dozens of them, were running wild. Some were climbing onto my old tractor, others sprinting toward my barn. Then I saw it. 2 kids were hanging off my fence, desperately trying to climb onto my biggest horse, Diesel. My calm, gentle giant of a stallion was standing there, ears pinned back, looking one wrong move away from bucking them straight into next week. That was it. I stormed forward, my voice booming across the chaos. Everyone off my land. Right now. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and for the first time, I saw a flash of something other than smugness on Karen's face. But only for a second. Then she smiled, strolling toward me like she had just run into me at the grocery store. Oh Jake, you're finally up. Isn't this wonderful? We're having a community day. A what? I could barely form words. A community day, she repeated like I was the idiot here. The families in the HOA needed a place to gather, and your land is just so perfect. The kids are loving it. She gestured toward a group of children who had dragged a picnic bench over to my fence and were now using it as a launch pad to climb onto my horse's back. My blood pressure skyrocketed. Karen, I told you. This is private property. You can't just waltz in here and act like you own the place. Karen scoffed, her patience clearly wearing thin. Oh, stop being so dramatic. We're not hurting anything. Besides, we took a vote in the HOA, and the majority agreed that this should be a shared space. I blinked. A vote. Yes. It was unanimous. Well, except for the one grumpy guy on Maple Street, but no one likes him anyway. We even have a petition. She snapped her fingers, and one of the HOA lackeys proudly handed me a piece of paper. Sure enough, it was filled with signatures, none of which meant a damn thing to me. I ripped it in half right in front of her. I don't give a damn what the HOA voted on. This is my land, not some public park. Karen gasped, her face twisting in horror like I had just kicked a puppy. You are so selfish, Jake. It's a beautiful day and these families deserve to enjoy it. You have so much land. Why does it matter if we use just a little bit? Because it's mine. I growled, gesturing at the circus unfolding around me. Because you didn't ask. Because you broke in. Karen threw up her hands, exasperated. Oh, for heaven's sake. You must know I had my lawyer look into it, and there's a thing called prescriptive easement. If enough people use land for long enough, it can become common use. So really, you should be grateful we're helping establish it as a community space. That was it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the sheriff. You have exactly 5 minutes to get off my property before the law makes you. Karen's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. You wouldn't, she hissed. Try me, I shot back. A few minutes later, the sheriff's truck rumbled up my driveway. Karen, ever the actress, immediately launched into a sob story before I could get a word in. Oh, thank goodness you're here, officer, she gasped, hands on her chest. This man is harassing families and threatening children. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Sam who had known me for years, barely spared her a glance. Karen, he sighed, rubbing his temples, Why am I not surprised to see you here? Karen blinked. What? I got a call about trespassing, Sam continued, scanning the crowd. Looks like we got ourselves a whole lot of people who don't belong on Jake's land. Karen straightened her back, crossing her arms. Sheriff, this land should be open to the community. It's unfair that Jake is hoarding so much space when we could all benefit from it. Sam sighed and turned to me. You pressing charges? For trespassing? Damn right I am, I said. Karen gasped again, this time in genuine outrage. You can't do that. Sam adjusted his hat. Surely he can. This is private property. Y'all are trespassing. Now you can either pack up and leave or we can start handing out citations. The families who had been enjoying their little unauthorized field trips suddenly weren't so confident anymore. The dads packing up the barbecue grill, the moms folding blankets. It was amazing how fast they could move when a uniform got involved. Karen, however, wasn't giving up so easily. You don't understand, she snapped. The HOA has plans for this space. We're going to fight this. Sam sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. You do that. In the meantime, I suggest you don't step foot on this land again unless you want to deal with a real lawsuit. Karen was seething, but she had no choice. She turned on her heel, marching toward her car with all the dignity of a queen forced into exile. As she climbed into the driver's seat, she shot me a glare that could curdle milk. This isn't over, Jake. I smirked. Oh, I know. That's why I just ordered some security cameras. Her face twitched and then she sped off, her tires kicking up dust. As I watched the last of the trespassers clear out, I knew this was far from finished. Karen wasn't the type to back down easily. If today was a warning shot, then the real battle was still to come. And something told me it was going to get a whole lot worse before it got better. I thought that after the sheriff shut down her little trespassing party, Karen would finally get the message. That maybe, just maybe, she'd realize she wasn't entitled to my land and would move on to terrorizing someone else. But I should have known better. Because when a woman like Karen is told no, she doesn't walk away, she doubles down. And that's exactly what she did. It started small. A couple of letters from the HOA, each one more ridiculous than the last. The first one was a formal notice requesting that I reconsider my stance on community access and engage in a civil discussion for the betterment of the neighborhood. I tossed it straight into the trash. The second letter was more aggressive, claiming that I was willfully obstructing community development and that my selfish actions were negatively affecting property values. That one got shredded. But the third letter, that one was different. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from a lawyer. Karen had actually hired a lawyer. I scanned the document, half expecting it to be some amateur nonsense, but this was real. The letter claimed that the HOA was filing a motion to have part of my land rezoned for public use. Apparently, Karen had dug up some obscure local ordinance and was trying to argue that since my property was adjacent to the neighborhood, it could be classified as excess land. And if she got the county to agree, I could be forced to allow community access. My hands clenched around the paper. This wasn't just some petty HOA nonsense anymore. This was an actual legal attack on my property. I wasn't about to sit back and let Karen waltz in and claim what wasn't hers, so I called up my lawyer, Dan, a no-nonsense guy who had handled a few land disputes before. He read over the letter, then let out a low whistle. She's bold, I'll give her that, he muttered. But she's also an idiot. This ordinance she's trying to use doesn't apply to private agricultural land. And even if it did, she'd have to prove that your property is unused or underutilized. I scoffed. She's been trying to claim my land as a public park for weeks. Think that counts as unused? Dan chuckled. Not even close. I'll draft up a counterclaim and shut this down before it even gets to court. I thought that would be the end of it. That the legal reality check would finally knock some sense into Karen. But no. She wasn't just doubling down, she was going all in. A week after Dan filed the counterclaim, I woke up to the sound of hammering. Confused, I stepped outside and immediately froze. There were men on my property. Construction workers. They were unloading materials from a truck, stacking up lumber, and my jaw nearly hit the ground, setting up what looked like the foundation of a playground. Karen was standing nearby, clipboard in hand, barking orders like some kind of deranged project manager. I stormed over, fury bubbling under my skin. What the hell is going on? Karen turned, and for a split second I saw panic flash across her face. But she recovered quickly, plastering on that smug, self-satisfied smile. "Oh Jake. So glad you're here. We're just getting started on the new community playground. Isn't it exciting?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Exciting? You're building on my land without my permission. That's called trespassing." Again. She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. The HOA already approved the project. And once the rezoning goes through, this will be official community property." My fists clenched. "The rezoning hasn't gone through, Karen. And it's not going to. You're wasting your time." Her smile didn't falter. "We'll see about that. In the meantime, why don't you be a good neighbor and let the workers finish? It's for the kids after all." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. "Yeah, no. This time you're getting arrested." Karen's face paled. "Wait. Let's not overreact." "Too late," I snapped. The sheriff arrived 15 minutes later, and this time he wasn't in the mood for games. Sam stepped out of his truck, took one look at the construction crew, and let out an exasperated sigh. "Karen, I swear, every time I get a call out here it's because of you." Karen crossed her arms. "This is a civil matter. Not a criminal one." Sam nodded. "Right. Until you started building on someone else's property. That's criminal trespassing, Karen." Her confidence wavered. And that means I have every right to haul you in right now." The construction workers, who had been standing awkwardly off to the side, suddenly decided they wanted nothing to do with this. One by one they grabbed their tools and started packing up. Karen's eyes darted between them and the sheriff, her panic growing by the second. "You can't do this. I was helping the community." Sam sighed. "Karen, get in the truck," she screeched, pulling out her phone. "I'll sue. I don't care," Sam interrupted, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. "You've had plenty of warnings." As he led her to the truck, I crossed my arms and smirked. "Told you it wasn't over." She shot me a venomous glare. "I'll make sure you regret this, Jake." I grinned. "Oh, I doubt that." Karen was booked for trespassing and destruction of property. Turns out she had already pissed off more than a few people in town, and once word got out about her little stunt, the HOA turned on her fast. They didn't want to be associated with a legal mess, and after some intense pressure from the other board members, she was forced to resign. But the best part? She got slapped with a hefty fine for damages and was hit with a lawsuit from another neighbor she had been harassing. She moved out of the neighborhood a month later. No one missed her. As for me, I made a few upgrades to the ranch. Installed motion-activated sprinklers around the perimeter, set up more security cameras, and put up a sign at the entrance. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." A week after Karen moved, I got a letter in the mail. It was from one of the HOA board members. An apology for all the trouble along with a gift card to a steakhouse as a peace offering. I laughed and tossed the letter onto my counter. I wasn't the type to hold grudges. But I was the type to enjoy a good steak. And that steak tasted damn good.